We have major updates in the Charlie Kirk shooting. Now investigators are saying that DNA evidence directly links the suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, to this crime. We also have information about messages that authorities say he allegedly sent. It does become a question where and how he sent them, but we're going to break it all down with a Utah reporter who has special insight from the ground. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We're continuing our coverage of the Charlie Kirk shooting, and there have been some major developments just in the past 24 hours that we want to talk about, like how federal investigators now reportedly say that DNA evidence directly links 22-year-old Tyler Robinson to this crime. In fact, according to FBI Director Kaye Patel, Robinson's DNA was apparently found on a towel used to wrap the rifle, the alleged murder weapon in this case, and even on a screwdriver recovered from the rooftop where the shots were fired. Speaking on Fox and Friends this morning, Patel also said that Robinson implied he was going to kill Charlie Kirk in a text message conversation and even wrote a note about this. That note, according to Patel, was destroyed, but get this, according to Patel, law enforcement was able to piece it back together. Now, prosecutors also are moving toward capital murder charges. As of right now, at the time of this recording, we are expecting Robinson to make his first court appearance tomorrow to be formally charged. But I will tell you, in a sidebar from last week, we covered this extensively, there is an affidavit that reveals he was arrested on suspicion of committing aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, and obstruction of justice. We will see if those are the official charges that are leveled against him. There is also talk about whether or not he will face federal charges. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, Utah Governor Spencer Cox has also confirmed that Robinson is not cooperating with investigators. But now, while he may not be cooperating, turns out, based on the reporting, others around him, including his roommate and family, they apparently are. It was his own father who reportedly urged him to turn himself in after recognizing him in surveillance photos that were released by the FBI. And now the big question, of course, is motive. Why would somebody do that, right? That's the big question right now that has been the focus of a lot of different narratives. Well, family and friends apparently told investigators that Robinson's politics had hardened in recent years, that he had criticized Charlie Kirk, specifically as, quote, spreading hate. There were the messages that were apparently engraved on the shell casings left behind that reference anti-fascist slogans, memes, song lyrics. Governor Cox confirmed that Robinson was in this romantic relationship with his transgender roommate, who has since reportedly turned over disturbing messages about retrieving and hiding a rifle, although I will tell you there was a strange back and forth about whether this was through the gaming platform Discord or whether this was over text message conversations. It's a little strange. We'll talk about it. But this roommate, by all accounts, was shocked by what happened here. Now, the investigation is still unfolding. This community, this nation is looking for answers about motive, security, what this attack means going forward. So to help break down the latest developments, I want to bring on friend of the show, Utah-based reporter, host, anchor for KUTV2 News, Brian Schnee. Brian, so good to see you. I mean, my gosh. You and I were talking almost every day when one of the biggest cases in the entire country happened in your state, Ruby Franke. Now we're back again, all eyes on Utah. There are a few points I want to hit with you. First, tell me, though, who have you spoken to? What have you learned on the ground?
Well, the very early days, we learned a lot through the course of just talking to people that work here locally for federal agencies and whatnot. When we were there, I got on scene in Orem about an hour after the shooting. I was sitting at my desk in Salt Lake City preparing for a 12:30 interview. And at 12:29, I got a text from a source who said Charlie Kirk has been shot in the neck, massive response. So I still conducted that interview, all while the phone started blowing up and everything started happening. And then we were able to get down there about an hour or so after the shooting took place. It's not a far drive from Salt Lake. For those not familiar with Orem, it is in Utah County, which is just south of Salt Lake County, which is where Salt Lake City is, kind of close to Provo, where BYU is. So there's a lot of university college students there in that area between Utah Valley University and BYU. And what we were hearing early on is, oh, there was a person in custody, and then that person was released, and oh, there's another person in custody, and then that person was released. And then we've got this information coming out from the FBI director that that person has also been walked back and released. So there was this information disconnect in the early hours of this where we knew the basics. We knew there was a single gunshot. We knew it likely came from an elevated location. We knew there was some law enforcement there, but not a whole lot. And we were trying to figure out what happened next and where did this individual go.
Now, you may already know this, but we here at Sidebar, we produce so many video clips a day, and we use a platform called Opus Clip. This may be of interest to you. It's an all-in-one AI editor that makes it easier and faster to cut, create, and upload videos across all social media platforms. Through the power of AI, Opus Clip, it automatically generates B-roll, it cleans up audio, and it reframes your videos for any platform. It is so easy to start using. Let me show you how right now. All you got to do is go to opus.pro/sidebar, sign up, you upload a video, and in just a few minutes, you will have tons of perfectly edited clips ready to go. So whether you're making videos for TikTok, Shorts, Instagram Reels, Opus Clip is your one-stop shop for getting your best content seen by more viewers across all these platforms with the press of just one button. And if you're wondering, how good are these AI video clips from Opus Clip? Just look at our content here at Law&Crime. Our producers have used Opus to help us cut and share clips of some of our biggest trials, and we get them to you very, very fast. At Sidebar, look, we know our listeners have a lot of opinions and ideas to share, and this is the most powerful tool there is to help you edit like a pro and grow your own audience. So give it a try for yourself. Go to opus.pro/sidebar to start creating your own videos today. And was it a scene just insane? I mean,
it was
just pandemonium.
It was, and we purposely, when I was driving in the car with my photographer, I said, don't go to the main entrance of the university. We're not going to be able to go anywhere. So my mindset was, let's go to the north side of the university, the northeast side of the university, where there's some access roads. It's kind of that back side to the university. And when we got there, the roads were closed, but boy, did we see local SWAT and police combing the woods and looking through cars and just marching back and forth to where at that point we realized, okay, I don't think they have their person. I don't think they have their individual. And we were watching them, use canines on culverts and tracking certain areas, going door to door, asking people for surveillance video, which is where some of that video eventually came from, where we saw Tyler Robinson walking down the street. And I was right in that area. And did we know it at the time that was likely the escape route after the shot? No. But when you were able to put pieces together, that is certainly what it felt like.
Yeah, the New York Post is reporting there is this newly released surveillance footage where you allegedly see Robinson walking in that area hours before the shooting. There are a lot of questions right now, and we'll talk about Kesh Patel in a second, but there are a lot of questions right now about security. There are a lot of questions about how, if Robinson committed this crime, he had access to that building. Are you getting any clearer sense about whose responsibility was what? Was there a gap? Were there deficiencies? Was there a lack of communication? Understanding a little bit more about how, if Robinson did do this, how he had access to that roof and was able to fire a shot at Charlie Kirk?
Well, it's not clear how he gained entry into that building and actually got onto the roof, but obviously some of the surveillance video you do see is on campus going up and down a staircase, right? So if there was a door or a certain access way that was left open. But what we did gather on Thursday night, so keep in mind this happened Wednesday in the early afternoon hours, we finally heard from a university representative on Thursday night who spoke to just about 2 or 3 of us in a small room right there in the staging area at the Keller building on the UVU campus. And we asked him about was everything followed correctly within your policy and protocol for an event where you have 3,000 event goers in a amphitheater-like open air venue surrounded by tall buildings. And they said, yes, everything was followed per our protocol, to which we asked, well, what are you going to do now? Because you have other events scheduled on campus. There's concerts, there's athletic events. And one of the kids I spoke to, I say it was a kid because he was a high school kid, right when we got there, he walked up to me and said, hey, I want to tell you about what I saw. And we were just about to do a live TV or a TV hit for one of the national programs. I said, if you can hang tight, I'd like to talk to you. And he hung around and he told me, I remember this vividly, and I also shared it on my social media channels, that he said, I feel like I've seen more security and police presence at sports events on campus than there was for something like this political speaking engagement, this rally, if you will, this organized group where people can come and have that freedom of exchange of ideas. And we learned rather quickly in that first press conference that there were only 6 uniformed UVU officers, to which one of my colleagues asked the Orem mayor, later that day or the next day, "Hey, were you asked to participate in this?" And they said no, but we would have had they asked us. So was there a breakdown? Not really on paper, from what I've gathered. It sounds like if they're telling everything to us truthfully, based on the questions we've levied at the university, is that they followed everything they would do for any other sort of community group sponsored event where, somebody like a Turning Point would come back and have a speaking engagement in that area. It sounds like it was the same thing. However, this obviously had deadly consequences for not having surveillance from up high, drones. I was at a concert here in the Salt Lake area just this past weekend. There was a police drone in the sky. I don't know if I had just not noticed it before, but with thousands of people in an area, even after you walk through metal detectors and all those things, there was none of that last Wednesday. None of it at all.
Yeah, and look, hindsight could be 20/20. We could say, oh,
Sure.
how can you not have that? How could you not ask for the police department's help? But look, to think about like something like this happening, I mean, was it foreseeable? I don't know. We can debate that. What I do want to know is what we're talking about today, because we just learned that according to FBI Director Kash Patel, Robinson's DNA was allegedly found on a towel that was allegedly used to wrap the rifle, a screwdriver recovered from the rooftop where the shots were fired. I mentioned earlier that Kash Patel also revealed evidence of a note and a text exchange suggesting he was going to kill Charlie Kirk. What have you been learning, and where does this fit into the overall story?
Well, this fits in exactly what I heard Wednesday afternoon from a source when I was in the area, telling me they found the weapon located in a brushy, sort of wooded area on campus, which, by the way, there's not a whole lot of room there. There's like a couple canals that move through, and it's pretty tightly knit there on the UVU campus. But again, this is kind of close to the area where I was standing that day, Jesse. We learned that I learned rather quickly through a single source that gun was recovered on Wednesday when I was there, and it was recovered rather quickly within the first few hours of that search. And then it was wrapped in a towel. Now, the picture we saw floating around on social media, which I could not verify, showed that rifle that was in an open box, if you will. I had not heard about the box, but I had heard about the towel. So now that we're hearing from Kash Patel saying this towel, that lines up to what I heard just hours after the shooting on Wednesday. And it makes total sense. I mean, if they feel like they have their individual and they put together these pieces finally after having the other individual who we were found just actually a probable cause affidavit for the first individual that was taken in. And you see those viral videos of that older gentleman who has the obstruction of justice charge against him right now.
George
After
Zinn.
they moved through this, George Zinn, yes. And he claimed, according to police, numerous times, I shot the guy, but he wanted to be a deflecting matter, if you will, for the actual shooter. So the obstruction of justice charge is now being pushed on George Zinn. And the towel and the rifle doesn't surprise me as new. I know it's new to us today,
Right.
but based on what I heard days ago, that lines up exactly with what I had heard from a federal source.
Brian, I'm actually really happy to have you on for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is it has been very tough for us here on Sidebar to report accurate information about what is going on. I find this very confusing. You know, Kash Patel came out, this interview on Fox and Friends, and said that he has no regrets by the message he put forward initially before Robinson was arrested, where he said the subject had been taken into custody and then was released. He said, could I have worded it a little better in the heat of the moment? Sure, but do I regret putting it out? Absolutely not. Do you find it difficult right now? Do you think the public is getting the full picture as this investigation continues? Because once we even get into the Discord conversation about what was said, I mean, let's put that to the side. Do you find it difficult for the public to understand what exactly is going on here?
I thought that in the early hours or the early days. I think people were owed a little bit more preliminary information quicker and in a more accurate fashion. There was so much complexity to the early hours of this investigation after the shooting that there was this catch and release sort of thing, because there were so many people there and you had all these political views and all these people that had these ideas that for some reason they would spit something out of their mouth that said, I did this, when they didn't. And that whole thing was a mass confusion. I do think there's a disappointment that we would say, hearing from the FBI director, hey, we have this individual in custody, it's the suspect. That's why they were so quick to use the word person of interest early on, because I didn't think they wanted the public to get the wrong picture of suspect versus somebody we believe may be connected to this incident, right? Was this one shooter? Was this multiple people in the crowd where it was coordinated? And now we learn really at this point, it seems like it was one individual who may have at least had those conversations, which you alluded to on the Discord app. The information flow was tough. You may have noticed that there was very little leaking of information out there. It was very tight-lipped. I would say I was surprised how little information was coming out, especially from of our national partners, right? That typically have really good high-level sources in certain areas. On the local level, I knew exactly who was spearheading the information flow. It started with the university and then quickly stopped. And then it took this larger scale from the state to come in and disseminate that information, which, was it a little messy at times? Yes, but I believe everyone was getting that limited information all at once. We weren't getting everything. It was very selective, the information that was being released. It was that real 5%, right? That 5% is being put out, or maybe less than that 5% with a lot of thank yous at a press conference, which isn't information. The patting on the back is not information. As the public, people want the information yesterday. I understand the delicacies, though, of this, Jesse, because this is perhaps the highest profile thing to happen in Utah in a decade, maybe more. Unfortunately, has the state back on the map again. You and I have talked about a number of things happening in Utah over the years now. Nothing quite like this. It was disturbing. It was heinous. It was unfortunate that so many of our young individuals in our area had to witness this firsthand. But at the end of the day, there's this yearning for information. And was it slow? Yeah, I think it was. Was it inconsistent? Yes, it was inconsistent. And I think that's where a lot of people may have gripes.
And look, there's a lot of questions right now, particularly about information about the motive and why he would have allegedly done this. And something we've heard a bit about is Robinson's online influences, whether he was being radicalized online. We had previously heard rumblings that he might have been involved in this online Groyper movement, this far-right faction of followers of commentator Nick Fuentes. And Newsweek even reported that the killing of Charlie Kirk has reignited attention on this movement, the Groyper movement, reportedly known for its confrontational style. It's rooted apparently in white nationalist, alt-right, Christian nationalist circles. It's frequently targeted Kirk for being too moderate. Online, we've seen reporting that Robinson maybe didn't like Kirk because he wasn't conservative enough. However, it is important to note that we haven't confirmed this information ourselves. State records reveal that Robinson was listed as an inactive voter at the time of his arrest and didn't have an affiliation. Governor Spencer Cox has confirmed that Robinson became more political in recent years, that before the Utah Valley University event, he had discussed Kirk's viewpoints during a family dinner. In fact, FBI Co-Deputy Director Dan Bongino told Fox News today that Robinson had a, quote, obsession with Charlie Kirk, also saying that there were potential warning signs, adding, I believe coworkers stated he had detached himself when the topic of politics came up and walked away. Bongino warned, did they hear it and think it was a joke? This is what we're trying to find out now. This is what he told Fox News. If there is a larger network here, we will get that out to the public as soon as we can. Now, Robinson is also apparently, or in this romantic relationship with his roommate. And as we stated earlier, this is somebody who is apparently transitioning from male to female, and from what we know, has cooperated with investigators. Cox emphasized that authorities are still trying to understand how that personal relationship may have factored into this attack or not. But the FBI has stressed that they are still investigating Robinson's background, the possible motive, and right now they are declining to provide more insight into political motivations. Brian, where do you see this conversation going? What have you seen in terms of what the potential background, motivations, events leading into this alleged attack by Robinson?
Well, a lot of the same. We heard about those family conversations pretty quickly about the family that actually helped turn him in after they learned this in Washington County, which you're familiar with Washington County. It's in the southwest part of the state. So this is not close to where UVU was. We also learned that he had learned about Charlie Kirk being in the area about a week or two prior. And there were those conversations that they eventually started to find on the Discord app talking about different things. But there was this moment where I kind of realized it could have gone this direction. It's when I learned that there were more of the inscriptions and engravings in either the weapon or the bullets. And that was something, as soon as I heard that, which was quickly, because again, I learned about the firearm rather quickly, but did not put that out because of the constant information barrage that was incorrect. I really wanted to be careful, which is why a lot of these things I didn't put out immediately, because there was so much bad information and misinformation being spread about this entire thing. That is when I realized that there may be more to the story than just a individual who's a little upset, but maybe had gone down a completely different path, which is what we're hearing now about Tyler Robinson as the FBI continues to investigate this. Heard some rumblings about a roommate. That didn't come out until a little bit later. Did not know about the transgender situation or the transitioning or any of that. But now as the story plays itself out, you do realize why initially they were calling this a political assassination, not just because there was a political figure that is there that has these political views and discusses political topics and gets the youth involved in these political conversations, but because there's this other side that this very well is potentially politically motivated in some which way, shape, or form based on viewpoints.
And just to be clear, have you seen anything from your reporting whether or not Robinson was leaning more left or was leaning more right, or do we still not know?
The only potential confirmation we've gotten on that is what the governor has said, which he says leftist ideology, right? That's what we heard very early on. And that's what he confirmed on the Sunday morning shows, basically ran the gamut on all the Sunday shows. You know, I hate to say it doesn't surprise me based on some of the preliminary information we were gathering about the additional information they were going to uncover potentially about the suspected shooter.
He has his first court appearance scheduled for tomorrow. Anything that you have seen to indicate that he wouldn't be charged with what he was currently booked on, right? Aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, obstruction, and right before we came on, at least News Nation and potentially a few other outlets have been reporting that federal charges could be at play. I'm not exactly sure what those federal charges would be. You know, there's no federal domestic terrorism charge. There's no just baseline federal murder charge. You know, I mentioned it before when you talk about the McGeough case. That was murder through stalking, you know, over interstate lines. I'm not sure if that applies here, but have you heard anything about federal charges? Do you get any glean about what we can expect tomorrow? I mean, what should we expect tomorrow regarding that first court appearance?
Federal charges, I've not confirmed that those would be on the table because I, like you, have no idea what that charge would be based on that investigation. Now, obviously, There's federal involvement here, right? This has been basically federal involvement since the very beginning. I would have a hard time believing that any of those charges that you mentioned on the booking would be less than. I think it would be more than. And is that because of pressure? Is that because of attention? Perhaps. Maybe there's more things they found that they can add on. We've seen that in plenty of other cases. You get somebody on one small charge, but then they're going to tack on 5, 6, 7 other things to just add as an emphasis to make sure there really couldn't be a strong plea deal here in any way, right? I know that they were discussing death penalty very early on in this. The governor is correct. We do have the death penalty still on the table in this state. We were scheduled to have an execution on September 5th. That was ultimately blocked by the Utah Supreme Court out of competency. These things are very fluid here in Utah, especially over the last few years, where we had a death penalty situation actually completed last year and had another one on the books for earlier this month. So the governor, very fresh on his mind, mentioning that as well. It'd be interesting to see where the Utah County Attorney's Office goes. Currently, they have one, if not two, capital murder cases right now on their plate involving a man who rammed into a police officer last year and killed him on the freeway, and also another individual who killed 2 little children a few years ago in a horse stable while high on methamphetamine. Both of those are capital charges right now at the murder level. This adds another big case, perhaps the biggest case, depending if you're going to play those cards, to this county attorney's office in Utah. And I have no doubt in my mind they want to get this right. I mean, they were already given the directive indirectly based on press conferences alone that both the governor and the president of the United States want to see a death penalty on the table here. And I don't foresee it not being there just because the statements have been put out. But I do think the harshest of the harshest penalties will probably be levied at the very beginning. And then, of course, you have to wait and see how the court process plays out, Jesse, because it could be slow as can be from here on forward.
And this court appearance tomorrow, what should we expect in terms of the actual process of it? Do you know if there's going to be cameras allowed, what time it starts, how long it's going to be, who's going to be there, anything like that?
If it is tomorrow, which I have not seen it confirmed, but if it is tomorrow and the timing, cameras will definitely be allowed. If it's an in-person hearing or a WebEx hearing in Utah, you can apply for pool. Utah is a pool state, so there's one media outlet that has that camera, whether it's in person or online. And it would be pretty standard, I'd imagine, with an initial appearance sort of thing, based on the reading of the charges. They'll schedule something out next. I can't imagine it being a very long appearance, Jesse, just because of what it is. It would probably run in line of every other initial appearance that comes out. It is very quick. You read the charges, you establish to make sure you have attorney or somebody present or a public defender, which if that's the case, if it's a public defender, that is going to run the gamut in Utah County with these public defenders that are already working on capital murder charges and cases right now. So it could get complex based on the docket of other things that are already out there in this county for other higher profile situations that have taken place here in the state. I'd imagine tomorrow, if it is tomorrow, the initial appearance won't last long.
Okay, now let's talk about this. The possibility that Robinson had shared details about the killing of Charlie Kirk with his roommate, including messages about retrieving a rifle from a drop point, hiding it in a bush, references to engraving the bullet casings. Initially, law enforcement indicated that some of those communications came through Discord. The company actually disputes that. One of our reporters spoke to a Discord spokesperson who said, "During our investigation, Discord identified an account belonging to the suspect. We have not found or received any evidence that the suspect planned this incident or promoted violence on Discord. The messages referenced in reporting about weapon retrieval and planning details were not Discord messages and likely took place on a phone number-based messaging platform. We continue to work closely with the FBI and local authorities and will continue to deliver prompt responses to their requests for assistance." However, in the probable cause affidavit, which we talked about last week, police are clear about what they say they were shown from Robinson's roommate. That part of the affidavit reads, investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler also mention that he had changed outfits. And now, and this is brand new, just came down right before we came on, Brian, I don't even know if you know this, but the Washington Post is reporting that Robinson not only was communicating on Discord, but that he even allegedly admitted responsibility in an online group chat just hours before his arrest. According to two people familiar with the exchange, Robinson wrote, "Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this." And a member of the group chat shared screenshots of this alleged confession with the Post. Brian, I mean, again, I think we're still a little confused as to what was communicated and where.
Well, the newest information is news to me. I mean, that obviously just came out moments ago. But the Discord conversations were the very first admission, if you will, that we could understand that there was a potential connection via conversation that Tyler Robinson was in the area at UVU. Now, we also know they have video of his gray Challenger in the area. We also know they have video of that on the freeway through license plate readers heading from north to south. Discord is where we first heard. So it's interesting to hear it walked back in a way, Jesse. Regardless if it was Discord or if the investigators didn't realize that it was another chat platform, Discord is not the only app out there where you can have these conversations where they're very popular on social media these days. Keep in mind, Tyler Robinson was described by the roommates and the people around him as a Reddit kid. Not to put any flack on Reddit in any way, but there are definitely some heated conversations and hearty conversations on Reddit. So it sounds like from what we've gathered, that Tyler Robinson could have been on Discord or a very similar app to that. There are other apps that people use like Kik and some of these other ones that are very popular to have these conversations on, these group chats. Discord is also an app that is used through the game Roblox too. So were they looking at a different screen at the time that wasn't routed directly through Discord? Was it used as a sharing sort of network through a different platform where Discord is used as the host? That's a possibility. That point, just speculating, because initially we thought Discord was the way that he communicated. So it's interesting to hear that he also had this group chat. That's news to me, but there you go. The evidence keeps building against this individual, where it makes me seem like, hey, they finally have their person. But again, a lot of the understanding about how Tyler Robinson came to be, from my understanding at least, is they were able to find some sort of trail through social media leading them to him, which is where they were able to identify him, not necessarily the admission of anything early on, but at least his image to social media to identify the two. Because for a while, we didn't know who this individual was in that photo, which, by the way, was distributed 4 or 5 different ways in AI fakes, which didn't help the situation. So I think they had a hard time identifying it first and foremost, had to use social media to do so. And then once they get there and figure out this individual is identifiable via social media, you obviously see that footprint fall out and know that he's been communicating on those platforms. Interesting to note that he has been talking about it, though. We knew about the drop point for the gun very early on, which is when I realized that gun was likely in a location very close to where I was standing when we saw that massive law enforcement presence when we got on campus just about 90 minutes after the shooting.
Brian, before we wrap things up, I just want to go back to something that you started. I mean, all eyes on this country, in this country, around the world, they're all on Utah once again. You are at the center of this. You're covering one of the biggest stories that is going to have such a major impact, and I mean, it already has, on this country. What is it like for you in the community?
Well, it's been a lot of deep sighs and trying to comprehend things. It kind of goes to what the governor said, Jesse, early on when he was standing there next to Kash Patel the first night that they spoke. And it was the evening that Kash Patel did not speak. It was just the governor and the DPS commissioner making their way through the video surveillance, but saying that we didn't believe this could be happening here in Utah, let alone one of our own from Utah. And that was actually after they were able to identify Tyler Robinson as the potential suspect. But just driving around the Salt Lake area over the last few days, there's been signs, there's been things written on cars, you know, in remembrance of Charlie Kirk. I'm constantly asked about it, whether it be in public, via text, just out at something else completely not work related. There's a lot of questions. People are very, very interested in this, whether they knew of Charlie Kirk or not. Keep in mind, Charlie Kirk had an audience. We all know the audience, very young, very interested in the debate, obviously leaning in maybe a certain direction based on Charlie's affiliation, with the current administration and his relationships there. It's been uneasy. It's been heavy. We've had some really heavy days here in Utah over the last month, where we had 2 officers shot and killed in a domestic violence situation. Just when we thought it was heavy enough, it keeps getting heavier in a different situation, in a different light, with an extremely high-profile, highly followed individual who had planned to come to Utah and make 2 stops here, which we know that Erica Kirk will likely continue with Turning Point USA. At least she vouched to do that. But just the week before Charlie came here, he had a video that he posted with Utah Senator Mike Lee, where, paraphrasing here, Mike Lee said, "We welcome you with open arms." And that stuck with me because so many welcomed Charlie Kirk with open arms here, but 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, a small percentage did not. And it was very evident based on not just the one individual who is in custody right now, but the others who wanted to obstruct the investigation and had certain viewpoints that were in the crowd that day. So it's been very difficult to kind of comprehend that, A, yes, it did happen here, and it's disheartening. And B, it brings up the bigger conversation, as we mentioned, and as we talked about security. Just going about your day, just going to large events, keeping a head on a swivel. I said that on live TV on Wednesday when we were on TV for about 3.5, 4 hours straight. Pardon me if you see me looking around, but we don't believe the individual's been caught yet. So is that person still around us? Are they still here? It was a sense of being uneasy in the moment and then taking a lot of deep breaths and trying to understand and collect your thoughts the following days.
I'm very, very sorry to hear like the impact that you just described, and particularly the death of those officers. Just couples everything that's going on there for you in the community. It's very difficult to hear. I think it's a tough time for the country in general, trying to make sense of this. And we are in the early stages. We're still trying to understand the backstory, if he did this, whether there were any connections, whether or not anybody really knew what might have been going on before it happened, based on Deputy Director Bongino's statements. So we'll continue to cover it. I know you will too. Brian Schnee, we always love having you and always value your incredible reporting. You can check him out on KUTV 2 News. Brian Schnee, thank you so much. Stay safe out there, okay?
Thanks for having me.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Instagram or X. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.